Hi everyone, it's Joe here from Lawn Solutions Australia, and welcome to this episode of Turf Talk, where we have another international guest on, and we're very lucky to be joined by the Georgia Crop Executive Director, Billy Skaggs. Billy, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Good to be here.
Now, we've known each other for a fair while now.
Yeah, about 5 years.
But a lot of our listeners won't be too familiar with Georgia Crop. They may be more so with ITGAP, which is probably where we're going to talk a little bit more today. But did you want to just give everyone a little bit of an introduction into what Georgia Crop is and what it actually does?
Sure thing. Georgia Crop Improvement is the seed certification agency for the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Per the U.S. Federal Seed Act, every state has to designate one organization or one entity as the group that certifies seed and sod. Mm-hmm. And so we've been around since 1946. We receive no government or state funding. It's all funded through our members and services we provide. Our core business is certification. And a lot of people, what is that? What's that mean? Well, certification, whether it's seed or sod, all begins with a known source of planting material. You want to start with pure, clean stock, no matter if it's seed or turfgrass. And so we start there with a release from the breeder, the plant breeder, and then that generation is blown up to make foundation stock, and then registered stock, and then certified stock. So the goal is that whether it's a homeowner, athletic field manager, whoever, if they buy certified sod, they get exactly what they're paying for.
Yep.
It's pure, it's true to type, no noxious weeds, no disease, to try to make sure that the end user gets the highest quality product available. Mm-hmm. The way we go about that is through, of course, a known planting stock. But the primary thing is field inspections, actually getting out and walking and riding these fields, looking for off types, looking for contaminating other species, looking for noxious weeds. And so that process is pretty laborious. It takes quite a bit of time to cover all that ground. But the thing about turfgrass in particular, as compared to seed, our seeded crops are annuals. Turfgrasses are perennials. Mm-hmm. So if a homeowner or a golf course is buying Tiff Tuff or Sir Grains or whatever it may be, that's a long-term investment. They don't want to replace that grass in a year.
Yeah.
They want that grass to be true to type and of good quality. That way they can use that product for many years. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the goal of certification, is through those protocols, field inspections, grower education, making sure that the end user gets the product that they paid for.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing, and people listening to this podcast will be familiar or may be familiar with the AUSGAP program.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit later about how that connects to ITGAP and also Georgia Crop. But the importance isn't just in turfgrass. You mentioned other crops as well. So
yes.
What else does Georgia Crop play, and what other things are we talking about?
Well, we're in a lot of different seeded crops. Our biggest one is peanut.
Okay.
We certify... This year, we will inspect and certify 140,000 acres of peanuts.
Yeah.
So it takes everybody we've got and several part-time people. But annual crops are different in terms of the level of inspection and just the level of effort that goes into it. Because an annual crop, it's only producing seed for that year.
Yeah.
Now, you still want that product to be great. You want it to be pure and true to type. But it doesn't carry on and have the impact that a turfgrass would have. Yeah,
sure.
But so we inspect peanuts, soybeans, cotton, wheat, oats, rye, lots of different crops. Mm-hmm. Peanuts being the biggest one. At Georgia Crop Improvement, peanuts and turfgrass really fuel the ship for us.
Now, Georgia Crop is unique. You mentioned before every state has its own seed certification company, but would Georgia Crop be one of the larger ones going around, would it, because of the nature of the state itself? Or
yeah, we're in acres-wise, we're in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
We inspect and certify more warm season turfgrass than anybody in the U.S.
Yeah.
We really started that program. My predecessor, Terry Hollifield, back in the 80s, at the time, the extension turfgrass specialist came to Terry and said, I know y'all do traditional seeded crops. You do peanuts and soybeans. Mm-hmm. We got a problem. We've got all this Tiffway Bermuda grass out there. This is not Tiffway. It's contaminated. Mm-hmm. We have golf courses and high-end projects that want to purchase good quality grass, pure, genetically pure grass, and they can't find it. Mm-hmm. So at the time, Terry, working with some other folks, they kind of modeled the Turfgrass certification program after the traditional seed program. So we started warm season vegetatively propagated certification in the U.S., and we inspect more acres than anybody in the country.
Yeah, right. Now, it is a massive thing, and people are going to hear the word acres a lot today, and they're going to hear a lot of thousands of acres.
Yes.
So there's a couple of things we have to establish. Is obviously it's not the metric system, but the second thing is turf farms and farming in general in the US is totally amplified compared to what it is in Australia. Like, you'll talk thousands and thousands of acres, where we'll talk tens of acres, sort of here. So you're gonna hear a little bit about that today. But that was a great overview of Georgia crop and the importance of seed certification. But it's quite a unique industry and a unique position that you hold. So how did you find yourself come into something like this?
Well, it was by chance, to be quite honest. I went to the University of Georgia, got bachelor and master's degrees there. My undergraduate degree was in turfgrass. I mean, it was in turf science. I got out of school and worked for a wholesale nursery for a couple of years. Kind of got my feet under me and kind of learned a little bit of the industry. Went from there and went back and worked for UGA as a county extension agent, which essentially a county agent is a local person in that county or area who is an extension of the College of Agriculture. So all the information and research that takes place on the campuses and research farms, it filters down through the county agents they're like the local delivery person.
Right.
We get the information to the farmer, to the grower, to the landscaper. Yep. So I worked as a county agent for about 13 years, then went to State Department of Agriculture for a couple of years in an administrative role. And then Georgia Crop reached out to me.
Okay.
My predecessor, Terry Hollifield, he was thinking about retirement. And so they said, well, go find whoever you want to take your place. So it was really it was an awesome opportunity out of the blue. Didn't expect it, but I love what I'm doing, and the chance to work in a bunch of different crops. It's seasonal, so we're always doing something different. And working with farmers was always a good time. Working with seed companies. So yeah, I didn't plan on it, but I'm glad where I landed. So
It's quite a unique job too. It'd be a good mix of indoor and outdoor. Probably a little bit more indoor now as you're at the top.
Yeah,
but,
I've been in the office more this year than I like. Ideally, about 50-50 is a good mix. But
sure.
And we'll get back to that. And we've got a great group of inspectors scattered around the state who do a heck of a job for us. So we got a good crew. So
you inspect all crops that you mentioned before in Georgia itself, but you do extend out of Georgia with turfgrass in particular. So
yes.
Where do you cover with the ITGAP program, and why don't you tell us a little bit about the ITGAP program?
Sure thing, yeah. ITGAP started in the late 90s, probably late 90s, I guess, in that period. And at the time, the University of Georgia was releasing a number of really good Bermuda grass cultivars coming out. And we had interest, UGA had interest from growers internationally, all over the globe. And the concern was if we don't have some sort of system or network or program to oversee this, number one, we won't know where the grasses are going. Are they being pirated? Are they being, reproduced without the proper agreement? And then also the other part of that was quality control. UGA was well familiar with what we do at Georgia Crop. And so, they said, well, we know y'all are doing it here. Can you do it internationally? And so at the time, my former boss and a number of other people got together and kind of put together the protocols of ITGAP, which is International Turfgrass Genetic Assurance Program. They put together those protocols based on what we were currently doing with warm season grass in the States, in Georgia. And so for a number of years, we used contract inspectors, and we still use contract inspectors. There's no way we can be everywhere all over the globe.
Sure.
But we do have a program manager who oversees that program for us. He's been with us a number of years. He's well-traveled and really has a great turfgrass background. So Don Roberts is his name. He's managed the program for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And then he does a lot of our inspections, but we do have some contract inspectors or guys who act as consultants to golf course and nursery and all that sort of thing who go and work on our behalf. Mm-hmm. So the ITGAP inspection that we do is once a year, but the farms themselves, very similar to AUSGAP, have to have a trained representative on site, and they do quarterly self-inspections and report back to us as to what they're seeing in terms of overall quality, any contamination, any weed issues. And so the annual inspection we do would not be effective without that cooperation with the farms and doing those quarterly inspections. And then we do training and webinars and those kinds of things with our growers, much the way that the AUSGAP team does here. So that's kind of where ITGAP started. Right now we're in 14 countries. We're in Thailand, Vietnam, Spain, Portugal. We're in South America. So we're really spread out. So without a good network of people all over the globe willing to work with us, it will never work.
You got enough acres in Georgia to look after.
We do. We do, for sure.
So ITGAP is the International Turfgrass Genetic Assurance Program, and its agent over here is AUSGAP, which is the Australian Genetic Assurance Program. Now, people that would listen to this podcast regularly will start to be able to put the pieces together here about the importance of certification for new turfgrass varieties. We've had Dr. Ambika from Texas A&M on here. We've had Brian Schwartz on here, Dr. Brian Schwartz, and a number of others where we're talking about introducing new varieties to the market. So what a lot of people may not understand is certification is so important to ensure the customer that's buying the grass can be assured they're getting a good product. The other side of that is, we use Tiff Tuff as an example. Tiff Tuff came out in Australia in 2013 in one 8-inch pot. Now there's 700 whatever hectares of Tiff Tuff in production in Australia. Your job's so crucial. You have to ensure the same grass that came out of that pot is the same grass that's in the back of Adelaide where it's planted, but you've got to do it on a global scale. So piecing it together for people, the role of certification is so important in that regard. So what I'm leading to there is, when you're going out and looking at turf crops and looking at paddocks, what kind of things are you actually looking for? How do you find them? What do you do when you find them? What's that process look like? Well,
our inspection is a visual inspection based on morphological features of the plant. We're looking at characteristics like leaf color, leaf width, stolons, seed head production, growth rate, texture and density, all those physical attributes or characteristics of the grass. And essentially what we're looking for is something out of place. Is there something there that looks different? And so it could be a difference in color. It could be something that's producing seed heads quicker or more abundantly than the turf that surrounds it. So really it's a visual inspection, and it's time consuming. I mean, you're going over those fields, really with a lot of attention to detail, trying to pick out everything that might be there. And the thing that I'll say, I've said it to our inspectors, you're not going to find everything, but that's why you have multiple people looking at it multiple times a year. And so it's that check and balance between what we do as certification, whether it be ITGAP or AUSGAP, and then the growers, they're doing those quarterly inspections, and the training and the time we spend with them hopefully helps them to find things throughout the year. But the worst thing that can happen is we go to a farm and there's no flags, and there's nothing sprayed out. That means nobody's looking. You can find something in most fields. Not that we're sticklers and we're trying to reject fields, but if no one's out there looking, that's contamination can go from a very small problem to a major problem. So it's really important, that attention to detail and the training that's involved, making sure that our inspectors are well versed, knowledgeable about the industry, and really take pride in what they're doing. I want our inspectors, whether it's ITGAP, AUSGAP, Georgia Crop Improvement, I want them to take pride in what they're doing, and when they leave that farm, feel pretty dang confident that I think I found everything that might have been out there.
And people might have a little bit of experience of this personally with their backyards. Like they might have a softleaf buffalo or a St. Augustine lawn, and they might be able to see a little bit of dew hanging in certain spots, and they can find a bit of cooch in it. But that's generally easy enough to find when there's different varieties. But when you're talking 1,000-acre field of Tiff Tuff, and you're talking another common, it might be Tiff Way or in our our wintergreen or whatever, how are you picking cooch out of cooch, zoysia out of zoysia? There's a fair bit of skill involved in that, isn't there?
There is. The biggest thing that helps an inspector is is to ask the grower, and they don't like doing this. I'm going to tell you I'm coming on this day. Keep the mower off for 4 or 5 days before I get there. Because a grass that's not a field that's not freshly mown, the differences in growth rate, the differences in color, whether it throws seed heads, all those things stand out much better in a field that hasn't been mowed. Now, from a production standpoint, they're on a schedule. They've got acres and acres to mow and keep taking care of. But that's a real crucial thing. Time of day is also important, depending on where the sun is in the sky and how the light's hitting the field, whether the sun's in your face or at your back. Those are all kind of tricks and skills that inspectors learn over time. You mentioned dew. Dew on the ground is a nice heavy dew is great for inspecting to find, as you said, to find cooch or Bermuda grass in a zoysia. But it can also help in cooch grasses, in Bermuda grasses, because some will retain it longer into the morning. So that time of day, getting out in the field, fairly early, if you've got a good dew, really spending time to try to get a look at all those fields that are holding that dew, because that's a good thing to look for. And the other thing is color. A lot of the common type Bermuda grasses or cooch grasses, the color is going to vary. The leaf blade is going to vary. It's going to be wider typically. It's going to be more aggressive. It's going to grow faster. So again, just looking for those little subtle differences. And it's not something you learn in a week or even a year. When we hire a new inspector, I'll tell them, you're probably not going to be comfortable for 2 or 3 years. I mean, it just takes that time and repetition to really learn what to look for. And
I've had a little bit of the experience in this myself, and I think you'll agree with saying it's such a detailed thing to find, but once you sort of get it, you can sort of walk past and go, something's not quite right there. I know with the manager here at AUSGAP, the Australian Genetic Assurance Program, you can walk past and go, something's not right there straight away. So you sort of get that. And that's going to lead into my next point. So AUSGAP is the Australian agent for the ITGAP program, which you mentioned before. And I guess what you just spoke about then, the detail that inspectors go to, going full circle from an end user point of view, they can have a lot of confidence purchasing an AUSGAP or an ITGAP approved product because they know this detail has actually gone into it. So I guess it's just a nice full circle story when they can see the amount of work that actually is involved with this sort of stuff, because the common lawn user wouldn't even think it is a lot of the time. And that just leads me into this. You're here in Australia, obviously. We're very lucky to have you.
I'm glad to be here. I enjoy coming here. It's been a little while since I've been, but it's great. I'm glad to be back.
What's your role while you're out here? Is it assisting AUSGAP more or less? Is it? Or
it's kind of twofold. Number one, AUSGAP acting as our agent for ITGAP. Part of what I do here is I wouldn't call it an audit, but it's just kind of making sure that AUSGAP is following ITGAP protocols.
Keeping him in check.
Well, and AUSGAP, they do a number of things in addition to what we do. I mean, worker safety and a lot of those kind of things. We're strictly focused on the purity of the grass. Yeah. So their spread is a little bit wider than ours, but the main thing are adhering to our protocols. They're doing the reporting, all that sort of thing correctly. The other part of that is actual inspections and meeting growers. So, we're going to be out inspecting farms this week and look forward to seeing those growers, doing some grower training while we're here. The first few trips I've made, I think this is my fourth time coming. We did a lot of grower training the first couple of trips. Now, I think the majority of them are kind of locked in. They know what we're doing.
Yeah, sure.
But for anytime we come, if there's a couple of new growers or somebody's new to the program, we're going to inspect their farm, but we're also going to take some time to kind of reinforce the training that's already done.
To that point, I think they're both of equal importance, checking the field or the paddock and also educating the grower on how to do it, because like you said before, self-inspection is a really important part of this, isn't it? Absolutely.
If one annual inspection per year, you're not going to get a good product. I mean, there's a lot of potential there to miss something, to miss something, and then a small problem grows into a big problem. Or if it's in a planting stock field, a foundation field, or a registered stock field, if there's a contaminant there, and then you dig sprigs, you harvest out of that field to plant a certified field, you just spread that contamination all over that newly planted field. So then what do? You have to renovate a brand new field if it's just crapped up all over it. So that's a big part of it. The quarterly self-inspections, growers understanding what we're looking for, and really growers taking pride in being an AUSGAP grower. Taking pride that their product, when it leaves their farm, is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's of the best quality, and the customer is getting good bang for their buck.
Yeah, it is such an important thing, and I'm glad you could describe in detail what is actually involved, because as I said before, a lot of customers, particularly retail customers, wouldn't even know this existed.
No, and most of them wouldn't know if they had a problem. I mean, if they're, working parents, both, busy jobs, busy family. They don't even mow their lawn. They have a lawn care service take care of it. They may not ever know it. But then on the flip side of that, there are some retail customers, some homeowners who they're fanatical. They want to know everything. They want to learn. And so you kind of have the spectrum there. But the goal is, whether it's the fanatical guy or the businessman, they all get the same product and it's all of good quality.
Yeah, that's right. Talking about Australia just now, let's fly back over the Pacific and go back to the US. And you mentioned before the relationship between Georgia Crop and the University of Georgia. You're an alumni, the University of Georgia, UGA, and we've spoken quite a lot on this podcast about UGA because obviously they breed a lot of the turf grasses that we bring into Australia. I want to focus on one in particular, and that's TifTuf.
Yes.
TifTuf has taken the international turf market by storm. What's been your experience so far with the growth of TifTuf in the US and particularly in the southeast or in the southern parts of the US?
No grass has ever gained market share as fast or as broad as TifTuf. TifTuf earlier this year crossed the 1 billion square foot mark of sod installed, whether that's landscape, home lawn, athletic field, stadium, whatever it might be. TifTuf it's done that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a beautiful grass, great color, holds its color well in the fall. Comes out of dormancy early in the spring. Color appearance is really good. The water use is tremendous. I mean, it uses 38 to 40% less water than the typical couch grass that will be grown in a lawn or an athletic field. For the grower, the great thing about TifTuf is you get more turns. It grows quicker, so they can get a harvest in, say, May. I'm talking in terms of across the pond, upside down. Well, you can get a harvest in spring, and you can get another harvest midsummer. And if your growing season's long enough, you might get 3 harvests in a year.
It's incredible.
And that for the grower to be able to have those turns and keep that product moving, that's a tremendous benefit. So TifTuf is it's taken off. Currently in the U.S., well, by the end of the year, we'll surpass 17,000 acres, which is about 6,500 hectares, something like that.
For context, that's bigger than the entire Australian turf industry.
I mean, it's it's pretty remarkable that it's 17,000. No, let me go back. That billion square feet installed. That's the equivalent of 45, 50,000 acres of one variety that's only been in the market for not even 10 years. And it surpassed Tifway. It surpassed all the other couch grasses. It's just, there's nothing else like it. It's really a testament to what Brian Schwartz and Wayne Hanna and the folks at UGA did early on in breeding that grass. It was 20 years in development of testing and research and trials and getting that on farms. Their work, the work of the Turfgrass group who helps market and license that variety TifTuf. So it's been a team effort, but it's pretty unbelievable what it's done in a short amount of time.
Oh, absolutely. We've felt that in Australia ourselves. I don't know the number. I think we're over 5 million square metres sold now. So those listening to this at home can get their calculators out and try and convert your billion square feet to our 5 million. But I'm sure it's not a lot in comparison. But 17,000 acres of TifTuf, right? So this isn't your only product and this isn't your only crop. So how do you inspect 17,000 acres of anything?
Well, the 17,000 acres is spread across the U.S. So it's and every state has a crop improvement organization when they have inspectors who are out doing their thing, just like we do. In Georgia, we have 10,000 acres in our whole program. That's all the Bermudas, all the zoysias, some centipede, that sort of thing. We have 5 full-time inspectors and a handful of part-time inspectors.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so to get across all that ground, I mean, and we inspect 3 times a year in the state. So it's very time-consuming. You got to get it done. You got to have manpower. In Georgia with crop improvement, we don't require self-inspections because we're there 3 times a year. But we do focus and stress grower training and education. We have annual trainings that our growers are required to attend to kind of reinforce what we're talking about when we're on the farms. But it's just a lot of bodies and a lot of time to cover that much ground.
And another big crop that you guys inspect is Zeon zoysia or Skaggs zoysia, as we know it here in Australia. And to that point that I mentioned about TifTuf before, the impact it's had on the US turf market, same question for Zeon or Skaggs zoysia. What have you seen with that? It's been in the market a little longer, hasn't it?
It has. Zeon it's essentially replaced the older fine-bladed zoysias. I mean, it's just, the older varieties that didn't have good disease resistance. They couldn't they couldn't handle tough conditions. Zeon Sir Grange has really become the dominant zoysia in the southeast for sure, and it's in a lot of markets across the country.
Yeah,
it's the water use, less mowing, all that's it just doesn't take that much care.
Yeah.
If you've got a homeowner who doesn't like to mow, doesn't like to fertilize, doesn't like to do any of those things, you can grow Sir Grange and not do very much.
Yeah.
So it's pretty forgiving. It can handle shade. It's beautiful when it's well maintained. Yeah, it's really been another big one for us.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here now, and people are starting to really understand how to look after and care for zoysia grass. So it's been an interesting one in Australia because we're so used to buffalo grass, St. Augustine grass, and bringing Tiff Tough and bringing Sir Grange to the market. There was an adaptation period for people because they're so different to care for. They're on different ends of the spectrum. Tiff Tough, you've got to mow it regularly. You got to look after it. It doesn't need as much water to establish. Where Sir Grange takes a little bit longer to establish, takes a little bit more water. But once you get it, it's a beautiful grass. Was it the same sort of teething period with Tiff Tough in the US for the retail customers, or
for Tiff Tough not so much because in the US, other than in the extreme southern part of the country, buffalo grass St. Augustine is not really a key player.
Yeah,
it's always been Bermuda grasses. Centipede and zoysia. So for us, the dominant Bermuda grass, couch grass for decades was Tiff Way. Still a good grass, has its place. So people were familiar with it.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty easy sell on that, and they took to it very quickly. Obviously, on the zoysia side of things, in the U.S., zoysia customers. They want and expect a high quality turf.
Yeah, okay.
So they're accustomed to the inputs, the maintenance. They're accustomed to that.
Yeah.
And then with Sir Grange, with Zeon, they quickly realized, well, it doesn't take quite as much care as the old Emerald or Meyer or whatever it might be. So it was adapted pretty well.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Yeah. The benefits of both are incredible, and I think we're in a good place in Australia now where we've got. It's not just a one and done solution. It's not just a choice of one. We have so many wonderful choices. We've just brought out Zoysia australis, which again is out of Georgia as well. And
beautiful grass. I haven't looked at much of it, so I'm excited to look at it while we're here this week.
You'll see plenty of it here, and I think you'll be pretty surprised. It's come out of winter, particularly in the Sydney markets where it's a little bit cooler, really, really well,
awesome.
and it's popped up, which is great to see. And so when you come out here and you assist AUSGAP in inspections, you're generally not out here for very long. So a lot of traveling this week? Is that on the agenda?
Yeah, we're going to cover a lot of ground, going to 2 to 3 farms a day, making visits. Yeah, it's the last time I was here for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's 2 to 3 weeks is probably ideal to come this far. But in my new role at Georgia Crop as executive director, being gone for more than a week, it wasn't going to happen. So I'm glad to be back and looking forward to getting out and seeing the countryside. Looking forward to talking to growers. Yeah. That's the most fun. I really enjoy that. And the cool thing is they're asking me questions and I'm answering questions on what's happening in the States and maybe some tips or tricks. But Joe, when I finish talking to a grower, I guarantee I learned as much as they did.
Yeah, sure.
Which is pretty darn cool.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been out here a couple of times now. We always love having you because we feel you're the most Australian American that comes out here. You fit in pretty good here. Yeah. So, what is it about Australia from someone from the southeast United States that you enjoy so much?
Number one is the people, the hospitality. Now, Aussies are very frank and tend to tell you what they think, and that's okay because that's kind of how we are in the South. I mean, but the hospitality, everyone's just been so welcoming and friendly, and I've made good friends here, and always look forward to coming, seeing the countryside, seeing the scenery, and I'm not talking about the beaches. I'm talking about rural Australia, driving from farm to farm, town to town. It's just always a joy to come.
So you have the same experience we have when we go to the US. It's quite a good one. It's not just New York and LA, and it's not just Sydney and Melbourne for you. It's not the Harbour Bridge. It's not all that. You actually get to see small town Australia, which I'd imagine would be pretty cool.
Oh, it's awesome. And two things about small towns in Australia, which we do not have in the States. Every small town has a pub and a bakery. And those are two things I really like.
I mentioned before you fit in well. You can enjoy the night, but then you can feel better in the morning with a nice meat pie when you wake up.
That's exactly right.
You had a meat pie?
I haven't yet, but it's on the agenda this week for sure.
I'll point you in the direction of a couple of good spots. Just finishing up now. So Turfgrass has been a big part of your life. Obviously, you mentioned before you've got a lot of experience in the ag industry, in the turfgrass industry. What is it outside of work that sort of keeps you busy? You mentioned you went to the University of Georgia. I imagine you're a Dogs fan.
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed with the game this weekend. This past weekend, we won, but it wasn't an impressive victory. Anything Georgia football, I'm all about. It's Saturdays in the South are just awesome. I mean, college football in the fall is great. I've got my wife and I have 4 kids between us, but they're anywhere from 16 to 23. So they're kind of doing their thing. Right. So they were kind of out of that phase. So really, it's just spending time with my wife and traveling, and when we have downtime, just taking it for ourselves.
That's great. That's great. And again, I think everyone, whether you're in the commercial turf sector, whether you're just a general turf enthusiast, whether you're just a normal homeowner, will get a lot out of this conversation, because the things you mentioned about Georgia Crop and ITGAP is what AUSGAP essentially does here in Australia. So when you're purchasing turf or when you're looking at turf, if you look for that AUSGAP or that ITGAP logo, the things Billy mentioned before is what you're getting with your turf purchase included. And again, a lot of people don't realise it. So I really appreciate you coming on and describing the detail that goes into turf inspection.
I'm happy to. And again, without AUSGAP, ITGAP could not maintain a presence here. I mean, the number of farms, the spread, the layout where farms are at and located around the country. Without AUSGAP, there's no way ITGAP could be here. So we're grateful for the cooperation.
It's a good conversation, and I hope you have a good week travelling around with AUSGAP, inspecting some farms. And after this, we might duck down the local bakery and get your meat pie.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Billy. Cheers.
Yeah, man.